is Melissa Terry, and I'm going to be walking through an informational reading passage with you. Whenever we work passages that have multiple choice questions, we want to decode our questions and we want to annotate the text. What that means is we want to decode by finding the skill in each question, and then when we annotate, we want to make sure that we're taking notes as we read the passage to pick out those important things. So the passage that I'm going to be using is from The Great Fire by Jim Murphy. So this is for the end of your summer reading packet. The first thing I want to do is go to my questions, and we want to pick out those skills. And I've got my screen already to question number 1 for you. Question number 1 says, reread the sentence from paragraph 5 of the passage. The answer was to make the roads and sidewalks out of wood and elevate them above the water line in some places by several feet. Which two phrases in the sentence best help the reader determine the meaning of the word elevate? So to decode this question, I would want to pick out where the location is, which is paragraph 5. I would want to underline my word, which I'm defining is elevate. And then I want to make sure that I'm choosing the best two phrases that helped me determine the meaning of the word elevate. Okay. For question number 2, the question says, what was the main reason that the middle class and poorer districts in Chicago burned down more easily than other districts in the city did? So how I would decode that question is I want to find the main reason, and I want to focus on that middle class and poor district. And I want to know why those two, it was easier for those two places to burn down more so than others. Question number 3. According to the passage, how did the location of the businesses affect the Great Fire? So in this question, I want to know that location. I want to know why, because of where they were located, what happened because of that. Question number 4. How did the details in paragraph 3 and 4 about the poor and middle class and wealthier neighborhoods contribute to the development of the central idea of the passage? So one thing that stands out to me right here, it talks about central idea. And we know that central idea means what the text is mostly about. Another word that stands out to me in here is the word contribute. And of course, we know that that just means add to, or what does it give to? All right, and so how I would want to decode that is my location, of course, paragraph 3 and 4, and how did those wealthier neighborhoods in the middle class, how did that help the development of what the text is mostly about? Question number 5. This is a 2-part question. We know what normally happens with part A and B questions. Part A says, which statement below best summarizes the central idea of this passage? So again, central idea, what the text is mostly about, and which of those is the best summary of that. Now, most often, whenever we have a part B to this is going to be where we need to find our proof for what we answered on part A. And that's what we're doing. And so to decode this question, this is a text evidence where we want to show our proof. Question number 6. Choose 2 details that show why Chicago burned when it did and copy each detail in one of the empty boxes. I just omitted the very last part of that sentence because this is a multiple choice question. You don't have anywhere to copy it to. So what we want to do is make sure that we're finding the 2 details that show why it burned when in the time that it burned. And then question number 7, you have another part A, B question. Part A, based on the Great Fire, which statement is true about conditions in Chicago in 1870 through 1871? Okay, for this question, we want to find the true statement. And when it's talking about conditions, it's talking about weather and other contributing factors like that. And then part B, again, it wants to know what is the best support for part A. So that's another text evidence question. All right, so now we want to go back up to our text, and we will read through and make some annotations together. All right, so the first thing I see is in italics, I see a little background information. The Great Fire of Chicago is considered the largest disaster of the 1800s. It is rumored to have started in the barn of Patrick and Catherine O'Leary, so that gives me a little background information. A shed attached to the barn was already engulfed by flames. It contained 2 tons of coal for the winter and a large supply of kindling wood. Fire ran along the dry grass and leaves and took hold of a neighbor's fence. The heat from the burning barn, shed, and fence was so hot that the O'Leary's house, 40 feet away, began to smolder. Neighbors rushed from their homes, many carrying buckets or pots of water. The sound of music and merrymaking stopped abruptly, replaced by the shout of fire. It would be a warning cry heard thousands of times during the next 31 hours. So, what happens in this paragraph is the author is setting the scene for you. They're providing imagery so you can picture this in your mind. Chicago in 1871 was a city ready to burn. The city boasted having 59,500 buildings, many of them, such as the courthouse and the Tribune building, large and ornately decorated. The trouble was that about two-thirds of these structures were made entirely of wood. Many of the remaining buildings, even the ones proclaimed to be fireproof, looked solid, but were actually jerry-built affairs. The stone or brick exteriors hid wooden frames and floors, all topped with highly flammable tar or shingle roofs. It was also a common practice to disguise wood as another kind of building material. The fancy exterior decorations on just about every building were carved from wood, then painted to look like stone or marble. Most churches had steeples that appeared to be solid from the street, but a closer inspection would reveal a wooden framework covered with cleverly painted copper or tin. All right, so paragraph 2, it talks about how most of Chicago's buildings were made from wood, which we'll later find that contributes to the conditions. The situation was worst in the middle class and poorer district. Lot sizes were small, and owners usually filled them up with cottages, barns, sheds, and outhouses, all made of fast-burning wood, naturally. Because both Patrick and Catherine O'Leary worked, they were able to put a large addition on their cottage despite a lot size of just 25 by 100 feet. Interspersed in these residential areas were a variety of wealthier districts where by no means free of fire hazards. Stately stone and brick homes had wood interiors and stood side by side with smaller wood-framed houses. Wooden stables and other storage buildings were common, and trees lined the streets and filled the yards. I combined paragraphs 3 and 4 together when I annotated because they both talk about lot sizes, and they talk about the middle class and poorer districts, and they're talking about the reasons why these fires were more easily started in these areas. Describes your neighborhoods. The links between richer and poorer sections went beyond the materials used for construction or the way buildings were crammed together. Chicago had been built largely on soggy marshland that flooded every time it rained. As the years passed and the town developed, a quick solution to the water and mud problem was needed. The answer was to make the roads and sidewalks out of wood and elevate them above the water line, in some places by several feet. On the day the fire started, over 55 miles of pine block streets and 600 miles of wooden sidewalks bound the 23,000 acres of the city in a highly combustible night. So paragraph 5 is talking about the solution that they had to building their streets and sidewalks above the water. Fires were common in all cities back then, and Chicago was no exception. In 1863, there had been 186 reported fires in Chicago. The number had risen to 515 by 1868. Records for 1870 indicate that firefighting companies responded to nearly 600 alarms. The next year saw even more fires spring up, mainly because the summer had been unusually dry. Between July and October, only a few scattered showers had taken place, and these did not produce much water at all. Trees drooped in the unrelenting summer sun, grass and leaves dried out. By October, as many as 6 fires were breaking out every day. On Saturday the 7th, the night before the Great Fire, a blaze destroyed 4 blocks and took over 16 hours to control. What made Sunday the 8th different and particularly dangerous was a steady wind blowing from the southwest. It was the gusting, swirling wind that drove the flames from the O'Leary's barn into neighboring yards. To the east, a fence and shed of James Dalton's went up in flames. To the west, a barn smoldered for a few minutes, then flared up into 1,000 yellow-orange fingers. So paragraph 6 and 7 tell me what contributed to the conditions of the fire. It explains the weather, and it explains a drought and what had happened to add more fuel to the fire. All right, so let's go to question number 1, and we'll answer that one together. All right, in this question, remember we were looking for the 2 phrases that helped us define the word elevate. All right, so if you look in the sentence and you think back to the paragraph, it talks about how the city of Chicago roads and things were having to be built above. So this tells me that choice D, above the water line, this made things not flood. So D, above the water line, and above the water line by several feet, it goes on to say. So your correct choices for number 1 are D and F. Question number 2. What was the main reason that the middle class and poorer districts in Chicago burn down more easily than other districts in the city did? Okay. The answer to this question is going to be C. And the reason is because the districts, they contain more buildings, more wooden buildings. Things were built closer together in the poor and middle class districts. All right, guys, remember you can check your work. You can check the work on the rest of this passage in your answer document. And don't forget, reach out to your teachers anytime you need help. Thank you, and I hope you'll have a great summer.